Now, the Fed has two mandates. One is to keep employment high or to keep unemployment low, and the other mandate is to keep interest rates low. And those are competing priorities. Now, if you have to keep inflation rates low, which in a good environment you have low inflation and low interest rates, that doesn't always work. But in a current environment, you have very low unemployment. So the Fed, I think, is acting as if they have just one mandate right now, and that's to bring costs down, to lower costs, and so they have the ability to get more aggressive. Europe, until Russia decided to invade Ukraine, had the same luxury. In fact, Europe at the beginning of the year was looking like they were going to have stronger growth than we were in the US, and they were looking like they could be aggressive on interest rates. They, as a result of the invasion in Ukraine, prices accelerated with supply chain dynamics that they have greater exposure to, especially with energy costs. And at the same time, they have to be more delicate with their interest rates, so they can't quite be as aggressive. So my sense in Europe is that they most definitely will be in recession by the end of the year, and that will linger into at least the first half of next year. In Europe, in the US, I think it's a more difficult question of if we go into recession and when we go into recession. Now, again, I said that when I talk to CEOs, they talk as if it's a foregone conclusion, so it does feel like we could do a good job of talking ourselves into a recession. Demand for workers remains strong. It is coming off of the peak, but you see the demand still quite strong for workers, and you see a very confident workforce. So the way I use for that is I look at quit rates. What percentage of workers are quitting their job without another job to go to? How many people are saying, I no longer want to do this job and I'm going to go find a new one? Only a very confident worker is going to quit their job before they have another one. And you can see it's come off of the peak, but it's still well above anywhere we've been since we started capturing this data. So you still have a very confident worker. Now you also have a confident worker that is losing purchasing power, at least right now, because you've got inflation rates accelerating above wage growth. So despite what looks like historically strong wage growth, it isn't keeping up with inflation. I think this is a real problem, though, for organizations and for corporations, especially ones that cater to these cohorts in the bottom part of the distribution. And just point number 7, my final point on the economy is that as much, again, as we're talking ourselves into this recession, recessions are found in the shocks. So economic expansions don't tend to die of old age. They tend to die because we mess something up and we strangle it. They tend to die because of a policy blunder or some other big shock. Until the pandemic, we were looking at the longest economic expansion we had ever experienced. And we were feeling at the time that growth was slowing, we were getting nervous about a few things, but we needed, so I would say all the fuel was there, we just needed a match. The pandemic was a very big match, it easily pushed us into recession. And I think that's, some would say, well, we've had this big growth, big recovery, and yet I don't know that there's a lot of fuel there. And it tends to be, recessions tend to be found in the shock. So let me highlight a couple ones. Coming out of the Korean War, we had massive government buildup as we went into the Korean War in '51. We come out of the Korean War, government cuts spending, growth, and think about what GDP is. It's government plus investment, plus consumption, plus net exports, right? And so if you think about that basic arithmetic, you have to push one of those levers in order to push us into recession. So coming out of the Korean War, government cuts spending, that's 53 recession. 58, we have a significant decline in the exports, down almost 20%. Part of this is a global recession driven by by what was then called the Asian flu, what we would today call a pandemic. Now we have felt the pandemic. We understand what they are. And so you had this very steep decline in exports, gives us the '58 recession. So it's the shocks that cause us to move into recession. Which of these 6 individuals are virtual, are synthetic, were created by a computer, and which are real? Any guesses? Bottom middle you think is a real person or a synthetic person? Synthetic. All right. Any other guesses? So here's the trick. They're all synthetic. None of these people exist. They've all been generated by a computer. And if that doesn't scare you, then research that came out this year should scare you. We actually trust synthetic media more than we trust real people. We find them more, first of all, we can't distinguish between synthetic and real, and we trust synthetic more. So I think this has important implications for how we engage. And think about these forces coming together and colliding. We are doing more in the digital environment. We're going to have these direct relationships with our customers, and at the same time, we're interacting with them in an environment that's highly conducive to synthetic media. And so I think you're starting to see that come out. This is a synthetic avatar virtual influencer. If you're not familiar with her, she has an Instagram feed with millions of followers, and she engages with brands. Here she is doing a Samsung commercial, but she's a synthetic media. Little Malika, right? Is that? This is Lou. This is her Instagram feed. You can see she's got 6 million followers on her Instagram feed. Also synthetic media. So this is a Brazilian retailer, and on her social media accounts, she'll do unboxings, she'll do product demos, she'll talk about products, but it's all synthetic media. But she has this persona, she shows up for interviews, and so you see this playing out in more places. This is the president of South Korea. When he ran, he was just elected earlier this year, and when he ran for that office, both he and the competitor who were running for president created these synthetic replicas of themselves. So it's quite easy today. You just video yourself talking, and then the way you control what this person says, what this video says, is you type it out. As I noted last night in a similar discussion, every manager that is managing a political candidate loves this because the person will only say exactly what's typed out. There's no going off script. And they use this to get this message out to different cohorts, right? So now the president candidate can go and deliver this message to this audience, can deliver this message to this audience. If you thought that the algorithms, which tell you what you see on Facebook and what you don't, were aggressive in influencing the information that came to you, wait till you only get to see one piece of this synthetic presidential candidate and someone else is seeing a totally different message. Now, let's combine all of these things as we think about companies starting to do this. So already this is happening quite pronounced in South Korea. I think it'll start to happen in the US. I've seen some stats that say by the next presidential election, so 2 years from now, 80% of the media around that election will be synthetic. And we are moving to a remote environment, work from anywhere for a number of organizations, and also hybrid. And I would argue we spent 10 years trying to prepare a remote worker. I think the thing that we haven't done well is to prepare managers to manage remote workers. I think that is the challenge for organizations and for universities, is to prepare managers in managing remote workforces. Working with them asynchronously across time zones, learning how to collaborate with them in real time, learning how to measure work product, learning how to rewrite workflows. All of that has to be rewritten in a remote work from anywhere type of environment. And we built up this environment so that people could work. We gave them access and computers and mobile phones, and all of that worked pretty well and allowed us to transition into the remote workforce quite quickly when the pandemic hit, but we haven't really fully prepared managers for that yet. And so I think that is our great challenge for organizations when we think about the future of work.